All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with, I think this is the third workshop in our series of community input on the various issues that are putting pressure on the city's budget over the next few years. Just as a recap, we had a workshop on roads. Got a lot of good input on roads from several people. That was a joint workshop with our roads committee. Very beneficial. Got to understand a lot of what the concerns are and even some ways to possibly cut the cost of some of our road improvement. Also, some community members did give us some input on some of our codes that they'd like to see, municipal codes that they'd like to see more robustly enforced when it comes to things like sloughage off the roads. The workshop before this was about the fire department. Again, a lot of really good participation, so a joint workshop with our fire department. Got input on, what people think service should look like. I think the one point that came out fairly clearly was that, people in the city expect a robust capability when it comes to our paramedic services. When I look around the room and look at the amount of, and I could say this because I have gray hair, the amount of gray hair in the room, I can understand why that's important to folks.
I don't have gray hair.
Someone out there said, "Are you sure?" I didn't say that. So for those of you that haven't been to one of these workshops, they're really informal. Just if you want to speak, just come up to the podium. We can take if someone has comments, if they're in a time crunch and they'd like to come up now and give us input on this workshop. So this workshop is focused on law enforcement and community safety. Full disclosure, and I'll try not to let this be a bias for me. I've been involved with the LA County Sheriff's Department for almost 40 years. So as a sworn peace officer, so I won't try not to let that bias get in the way of how I conduct this workshop, but I will say that I'm pretty outspoken about the level of service that we get from the Sheriff's Department. I work with Rafferty from time to time to make sure that service is representative of what we pay for. I think we're really fortunate to have the deputies that have been involved with us. So for what we can pay, I think we get a lot from our deputies. The current deputy actually owns a property here in La Habra Heights, so we get a very unique level of service from that deputy, which I don't know that we've got before. But the deputies that have been here before have been a unique set of individuals that have been willing to partner with us on what we need for our city, because we have a very unique set of requirements in this city. The type of issues we have generally are not the type of issues that most deputies deal with day to day. Our traffic enforcement, especially commercial enforcement, is important to us. Quality of life issues are important to us, and along with the enforcement sometimes of our code section. So our deputy here does a lot with our folks out to go out and ensure that brush clearance is done, and when we have to force brush clearance, they're there to keep the peace and make sure no one gets hurt and that cooler heads always prevail on those issues. So it takes a fairly unique deputy to do that. That being said, I think it's pretty common knowledge that we don't have 24/7 police coverage in the city from a dedicated individual. So I want to make sure that's known. We not dedicated, so the deputy is in the city 40 hours a week is what we currently pay for. We work with that deputy to adjust those hours to deal with the issues we see in the city. After that deputy leaves for the day, coverage is still provided, but not on a dedicated service from industry sheriff stations. So I think what we've heard fairly loudly is that there are some extended lead times sometimes when our city deputy isn't here, and that's a concern I think we need to look at. I know that one of the folks in the room has sent I think some of us some information about how other cities are using that through some contracted services that are provided. Something we as a city can look at. We can discuss today if people want to discuss that. But the other concern that we obviously have, and the reason for this series of workshops, is that the cost of the service, like the cost of everything, is increasing. And in some cases, the increase for the Sheriff's Department services isn't linear. It's not tied to the cost of living. Unfortunately, it's really tied to the cost of providing the liability coverage that's needed in today's policing environment. And that cost is not sometimes representative of the cost of living. It increases sometimes very exponentially, given the types of events that law enforcement is exposed to. And we're not immune from that. Even though these things don't happen in our city, it's still an overall cost of law enforcement and the cost of partnering with the Sheriff's Department. So those are my opening comments. I don't know if any of the other council members have anything they'd like to add.
If I might just kind of scope out the issue. So our primary funding, of course, is real estate taxes, right? We get 0.14% of the annual real estate tax. And by example, the County of Los Angeles gets 37% of those dollars. In fact, as an interesting aside there, the La Habra Heights Water District gets almost the same amount as we get. What do? They provide water, and they bill their tenants. Well, we don't build residents. We just collect real estate tax. The actual cost today, experienced last year, is almost 30% of our entire real estate income budget. So the sheriff is an unfunded, obviously a requirement that we must do. So when we look at that, we have to decide, how do we continue to afford the level of service we're getting? And one of the things Rafferty's presentation today will give us is some clarity on what's happening with other cities. The reason, and one of the many reasons that we often forget, is that not just the deputy in the city that's important, but it's all the backup, the county jail, the SWAT teams, the helicopter teams, traffic maid enforcement, things like that are all part of the cost that is absorbed by the Sheriff's Department in exchange for us paying them. So it's more than just a deputy in the city. And as we look at the other cities, when we've done that now, it's pretty clear that we have probably the best deal we could possibly get as it stands today. The other thing is what are our choices? That'll come up today as well, but our choices are simple. Everybody around us is on sheriffs, except for the folks in Orange County, and except for Whittier. Whittier is there. I believe the Whittier current budget, Rafferty will probably have the number, but I think the Whittier current budget is, they have their own police department, and they provide service to Santa Fe Springs, if I remember correctly, at a cost of like
$16 million.
$16 million. So the idea of us becoming attached to Whittier seems kind of absurd at those kind of numbers. So the $800,000 that we're currently paying and projected to pay may or may not be the best number we can get, but we're pretty convinced it might well be. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Others?
It just might be interesting, Rafferty, to give us what we actually spend. I do want to stress, we do have 24-hour coverage, and they do come. And I don't know that the sheriff is here the same hours all the time. I'm sure that will come up. But it would be interesting. I think people want to know the cost of the sheriff and then the cost of the insurance and maybe how much it goes up each year.
Thanks, Carol. Norm, did you have something? You looked like you were ready.
I'll save most of my comments until later after I hear from the residents, what they have to say. But essentially, I just want to mention that I serve as a VOP, a volunteer on patrol, for several years, and I'm currently a volunteer with the Sheriff's Department with disaster communications. I don't, it's a purely civilian job, but it's a volunteer job, and there are volunteer opportunities. And I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Right.
Just to follow up a little bit on what Greg was saying on the, because I got involved in this way back when, and we did look at Whittier at the time, and we were unsuccessful as far as doing any negotiations, and we actually did negotiate with the Sheriff's Department back then some time ago where we were able to reduce the cost substantially. So thank goodness we were able to do that at the time, because otherwise the multiples, you get an increase virtually every single year, and it's, you know, based on the liability and things and their cost of service. So if we wouldn't have been able to roll that back many years ago, we would have been really in bad shape now. So we do get good service out of the Sheriff's Department. We have looked at all those other options. And like La Habra, that's Orange County, so you can't use them. You'd have to go to Whittier, and we did look at that.
I was under the impression that Whittier took on Santa Fe Springs, but there was so much turmoil and union that, at least in the past, Whittier was not willing to look at any other.
All of that's true. I didn't want to talk about that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But no, that is true. It is true. That was their negotiations for Santa Fe Springs was very turbulent, and at the time we were looking at getting a bid from them too, and it was they were not even interested in looking at us at the time.
If I can mention one more thing, our neighbor Alex Villanueva, when he was sheriff, it dawned on him that we were paying an extra half hour to 45 minutes a day for the sheriff to report to the industry station, drive his car to La Habra Heights and begin to patrol. So what he's able to do is set up a sheriff's substation at City Hall. So essentially what happens now, the sheriff reports to duty at City Hall, so you essentially end up getting about 45 minutes a day of extra patrol. It gives us as an example of things we can do to take a look at things and try to find savings and way to better utilize the time that we do receive. Thank you.
All right. Rafferty.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and everybody for attending. We're very appreciative as we kind of go through these strategic planning workshops to kind of look at how we spend our dollars and make sure we spend them the wisest as we can. We do have a little bit of a presentation. Mr. Blagan will help me out there with the lights. We'll run through the presentation and then have a little more time for discussion. So like the mayor was saying, today is law enforcement services and community safety overview. Some of the things we'll talk about is just a review of our current law enforcement staffing and operations, which we touched on a little bit already. Our current statistics, service trends, a summary of some of the costs. I think we can have a discussion, explore options for recommendations for service coverage or changes, or anything we may want to do a little bit different in the next coming years. So currently, we do have a contract with Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. The one nice thing about the Sheriff's Department is they provide lots of services. And even municipal police departments like City of Whittier or other jurisdictions that have their own police department still contract with the Sheriff's Department for certain things related to, you know, investigation and forensics, SWAT, and those other larger scale things that are still needed, but maybe those smaller police departments don't have all of those things readily available at all the time. That's one nice thing about the Sheriff's Department is they have those. With us having that direct agreement, those services, if needed, are available to us right away. As those situations escalate, the sheriffs are already on scene and kind of go through that aspect of it there. So our current staffing model is that it's a 70-hour-a-week deputy. So we pay basically for deputy service 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. We do have a primary deputy. When I first started at the city, it was Deputy DeVille was our primary deputy, and then he retired. We had Deputy Valencia, who moved on to another jurisdiction, and we currently have Deputy Beltran. who's our primary deputy. The one nice thing with having a primary deputy for us is that we can get that extra level of service where some things may not be a crime. Our local deputy that's assigned to us understands that and will take the time to help our residents. So that's the one nice thing about having that primary deputy for us, is being able to do that, have them there to be able to help out, get to know the community. Lots of people will stop and talk to Deputy Beltran. A lot of times you'll see him at the park waiting for trucks to come over the hill. So a lot of people will stop in and say hi and ask questions to him, which is a great thing from that. We do have additional services that we do on an overtime basis. So we do pay for extra and additional services. Sometimes in the past we've used the motor deputies, which are the motorcycle cops. Those are really good at traffic enforcement because they can get out quickly after cars that are going fast and zip through areas and be able to catch up to speeding cars, which is really, really handy. So we've done that. We have done some other larger areas of like large truck enforcement and other things like that in the past. Currently, all we do is we have one community services officer. So that community services officer is about 20 hours a week. He's here in the city. That officer helps with writing reports, so nonviolent theft or reports like that. They will take those, mail theft, vehicle burglaries. They also do traffic enforcement reporting, so anybody traffic collision, they will assist with doing all the reporting for those traffic accidents and collisions, and do our parking enforcement for us as well. So the one nice thing with having that on overtime basis is that his name is Anthony Lopez right now. He adjusts his schedule need be if there's an issue in an area with like overnight parking or something. He's flexible and he's able to adjust his time to come in and meet with that. And he will stop in with us at least once a week to see how things are going, if there's any areas of concern or anything that he needs to go out and take a look at a certain area or something like that. And he'll make those necessary adjustments. So anything beyond the like 70-hour deputy, like we said, we do have 24-hour coverage. Beyond that time, we're billed per minute. So basically, if there is something larger, it's billed per minute. And once we go above our time, we have a very good captain and lieutenants at the industry station right now. So they do a good job of making sure that we get our full coverage, that we have all the time here. Obviously, everybody's probably heard there's always lots of shortages of deputies and law enforcement. So people are constantly coming and going, and they're always recruiting very heavily at the Sheriff's Department to try to make sure they have a staffing. Industry Station is one of the larger stations out there, so they do have a lot of deputies. They have a lot of resources at hand and in the area. So it is nice. There are lots of deputies and people around that can come and assist when our primary deputy is not in town. We'll quickly run through some of the statistics over the last 5 years. So if we go to the next slide there. So you can see violent crime we're a relatively safe community, which is nice. So as we were kind of talking about earlier, some of the things that are out there that we may need a larger presence law enforcement wise, we're fortunate to not necessarily need a lot of those things, but there is there. So you can sort of see, in the green is the rapes, so relatively low. Blue is homicide, so relatively low for that. Assaults have been the thing that has been on the rise in the city. So for 24-25, there was 8 in that last year period. So all this reporting is for the last fiscal year, the 24-25 time period. So a little bit of an increase over that year to year. You can see that climbing in 2023 and kind of steadily going up from there. If we move on to the next one, which is burglaries and crimes from there. For the most part, very relatively quiet for us. You can see things have been turning down, which is nice. So our crime rates have been a little bit lower. Things have been trending down over time. Last year, we can see that significant reduction in some of those numbers, which is a great thing for us. It's obviously our community watches out, calls for sheriffs when needed, which definitely helps for us being able to keep a quiet, low crime community. Christina, next one. So this just kind of gives you some of the the crime trends over the years. So blue with grand theft, vehicle burglaries, petty theft, and then some of the totals for that. You can kind of see that the grand theft and vehicle burglaries are the most common that we see here. Those ones really do the most. In the 22, 23, there was a period of time where there were quite a few vehicle burglaries that were happening in town. At that time, I think Deputy DeVille was our deputy. You would hear him at council kind of talking about making sure lock your car doors, don't leave valuables in your car. There was a lot of people that were driving through the community in that time, sort of the tail end of COVID time, or people working from home, so keeping things in their cars. So there was a bit of an increase in that time, which is kind of the outlier for us from that one. The next slide is just some of the totals. So kind of look at the totals over the years, and you can see that 22, 23 was a little bit higher. A lot of that is those vehicle burglaries and thefts that did occur in that time period from there. Go to the next one, Christina. So operating challenges. So, limited proactive enforcement and community outreach. Like we say, we have a 70-hour deputy. Our deputy right now, Deputy Beltran, is really good about varying his hours that he works. He doesn't work just like Monday through Thursday, like we do here at City Hall. A lot of times you'll see him here on Fridays and Saturdays. And then also if there are other events or things that happen on a consistent basis on a date and a time, he will adjust his schedule and try to be able to be there to see those things going on and make any arrests that may be needed for those things. Obviously, the other part of it is outreach. Law enforcement services does cost a generous amount of money. It goes from the budget towards law enforcement services. A little bit later in there, you'll sort of see across the board there is quite a bit of money that gets spent by budgets into law enforcement services over there. So obviously funding is that. When we look at our budget and how we do things, we're primarily on property taxes is our primary source of revenue. We do get a little bit of money from the state and the Fed that goes towards law enforcement, but it's not a great amount of money. Angie will touch on that one in just a second here from there. But yeah, so those are a couple of our issues there, operating challenges we have. And Christina, the next one. So up next is funding and cost projection. So we'll walk through some of our annual cost per deputy and other of our funding sources from there. And I'll hand it over to Angie, and she'll talk a little more about the costs for services.
So I did a 5-year cost analysis on general law enforcement and all the fees. So we have our base general law enforcement, which is strictly just the deputy, and then we have our additional services, which, like Rafferty said, traffic enforcement, anything the other deputies do. So I ran a report beginning fiscal year 2021, and we were paying about $625,604 for that fiscal year. That's what we paid. And in additional services, it was about $120,000. So for that year, it was $745,270. The following year, for 21-22, our base for just deputy was $634,699. The additional services was $983,982,000. That total actually decreased from the previous year. So the total for that fiscal year was $728,682. Then for 22-23, our base slightly went up to $64,771,000, and the additional services did increase to $35,926, bringing the total lower than the previous two fiscal years to $6,709,697. Then in 23-24, The base did increase a little bit to $699,014, with the additional services also increasing, almost doubling to $69,911. There was an increase. The total for sheriff's services was $768,925. And then this last fiscal year, 24-25, it did increase to $726,318. The additional services did increase to $19,727. And the total was slightly less than the previous year, totaling $7,046.44. And in that 5-year span, the total for sheriff's services, including any additional services, was about 3.6 million. So everything has fluctuated, and every year fluctuates. So the base for the sheriff has increased due to the liability trust fund, but luckily it hasn't been such a drastic increase. I also wanted to note that we do receive COPS funds, Citizens Option for Public Safety. So all cities and counties and special districts do receive a portion every year that's allocated to them. The minimum allocation amount is $100,000. We currently receive about $180,000. It just, every year it has increased a little, so those amounts are transferred to pay into the sheriff's account to help us with sheriff costs. So about every year, I transfer about, it has been the past few years, $150,000. So this year, I believe it's $160,000 also that I was able to transfer to the general fund to kind of supplement the sheriff's costs.
Thank you, Angie. If we move to the next slide, you can kind of see our surrounding area. So obviously, to the north of us is two unincorporated areas of Hacienda Heights and Roland Heights, which were both served by the Sheriff's Department along with us. Down at the lower end of the screen is La Habra, and La Habra is in Orange County. And unfortunately, the way things are structured today, we can't go across county lines to ask for services. So we wouldn't be able to go to La Habra and be able to ask them to provide law enforcement services to us. When you go to the west of us, there's the city of Whittier. So Whittier has their own police department, and like we said earlier, they do provide services to the city of Santa Fe Springs. There are also other areas within Whittier that are also serviced by the Sheriff's Department. So we are really surrounded on most of our sides with the Sheriff's Department. So we have a lot of sheriffs around us, into us. So it does make sense why we are with the Sheriff's Department, as we have so many other jurisdictions and only one other area that we would be able to go to look at trying to ask for providing service to that, unless we wanted to strike off on our own and try to develop our own police department for that. But so those are sort of the areas around us, and you can kind of see that there's a lot of areas is represented by the Sheriff's Department as we go through it. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what it costs for municipal law enforcement services. I've worked at full service and contract cities. That's the way a lot of people will look at cities. You look at them as either full service, so you provide everything, or you're a contracted city where you use contract with like Sheriff's Department or County for Fire or things like that. So cities that do have municipal police departments, kind of going through the state and looking at what those expenditures are. How much do those cities pay for those police departments? Looking at a smaller city, so smaller cities will be more a little bit closer, similar to us. Kind of looks like that's usually about $7 to $10 million. Looking across the state, there's a couple of areas that I found similar to us, a little more rural, a little more hilly, a little more out of the way. They're a little Northern California though, like so Scotts Valley and Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg spends about $7.3 million on their police department annually. Same thing with Scotts Valley. Scotts Valley is close to Santa Cruz in the mountains up there. It's about $7.8 million they spend annually for their police department. The city of Palos Verdes Estate, so close and local to us, very similar. A lot of times we compare ourselves with that community as well. Their police department's $8.2 million that they spend annually for having the police department there. And then sort of stepping up into like the more medium-sized cities. So my city that I worked at previously is on this list. It's kind of in that $10 to $15 million range. The city of Signal Hill is one of those. So everybody kind of knows Signal Hill area. They spend about $14.6 million. City of Placentia, not too far away from us in Orange County, about $14.7 million. City of Laverne, where I previously worked, spent $17.4 million on their police department in Laverne. Los Altos, again, about $17.4 million. Those are those more medium-sized cities. And then you move into like a larger city. So city of Covina, you kind of see that larger cities are going to be $20 to $50 million. I didn't look at big cities like Anaheim or city of LA or those really large cities, because you're going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars when you get to those large departments of that. Like city of Covina, $27 million. City of Brea, one of our adjacent cities, $30 million. Same thing with La Habra. La Habra is about $30 million they've spent on their police force. City of Whittier is $41.3 million they spend for their police department. The city of Whittier, and as part of that, they do contract service to city of Santa Fe Springs. So the city of Santa Fe Springs pays about $16.3 million of their budget to pay for the law enforcement services to city of Whittier. And then Buena Park, city of Buena Park, it's about $49 million that they spend on their police department over there. So you can kind of see there's a wide ranging there, but it really kind of breaks into that $7 million is what you're looking for in a very smaller community. When you look at Scotts Valley, kind of similar to us, hilly, narrow roads, high fire zone area. There's a little bit of commercial in that city, but there again, you're about just under $8 million for law enforcement services for the community. So obviously you look at the bang for the buck that we get with the sheriff's department is there. Obviously, you have the backing of a large department, you have the backing of anything you may need in that rising level of an incident. They're there. They have the airships to come in and monitor things. They have lots of technology. Every year, Angie and I, as we do in the budget process, the Sheriff's Department puts on a city manager's workshop where we go in and see the technology that is changing, the way they're working to reduce the liability, which a big component of our cost for the Sheriff's Department is liability. So there is a liability trust fund that is a component of our cost for services with the Sheriff's Department. And every year that goes up by a different percentage. And we're 12% this year?
This year it's 13.5. Last year, 24-25, it was 12.5%.
So you can see that liability trust fund does creep up and increase significantly. Obviously, you see those things on the news. You see we're a very litigious community or society. So there is lots of things that go on. And when you look at what law enforcement and the sheriffs have to work with and deal and control those situations, it's a very difficult thing to do. But it's nice to know that there's a very robust training implement and regiment there. They are working with lots of new technologies as far as their drones and SWAT and just the things that the deputies carry on them. They're moving to a different type of taser that is a little more effective. So we reduce the need for guns and other things there. So it's quite a bit that they do, and it's nice to know that we have that ability to climb through it. And we do have a very good captain and lieutenants at the industry station. They do keep watch of us and reach out to us and talk with us. One of the lieutenants over there used to be our primary deputy, so he used to be here and walk the streets with us. So he knows and he loves the Heights, so he definitely helps keep us in the forefront over there as we kind of go through things. But those are really all the things we have for the slide. Now it's more just working into a discussion and a little more question and comments of things.
So, Rafferty, we talked earlier about how we use our dedicated deputy, which is 40 hours a week. We have 30 hours that are left over for all the other stuff that happens in the city. So like when we have a traffic accident in the middle of the night, and deputies respond. They chew into that time. What's our, I mean, do we feel does that sufficiently cover that need of the city, the extra 30 hours a week? Or is it, are we constantly finding ourselves on one side or the other of that?
No, for the most part, especially very recently, we have been in that time frame there. So we haven't really been eating too much into those additional 30 hours outside of what Deputy Beltran works here. We have not been eating too much to where we're getting charged for additional services because we have lots going on in town or a lot of need for service. I'd say the last 2 years we haven't really had too much additional services where we've gone over the minutes to that. In talking with our ops lieutenant and lieutenants at the station, there are other things if we wanted to look at trying to add pieces for the community or something like that. We could look at trying to pay for a traffic car, so have a dedicated deputy that would come in for a certain period of time, and all they would do is write traffic enforcement. So they would be tickets and things like that, which theoretically we get a small portion of that ticket revenue, which may offset the cost of providing some of those services. Would be really something we could consider if we wanted to look a little more heavily at traffic enforcement. I know right now Deputy Beltran does a really good job with, especially the large trucks. Somebody the other day saw one coming down East Road, called Grace. Grace called Deputy Beltran, and he's like, "I'm pulling them over right now." So,
No, I know he does an amazing job on the commercial enforcement. I would say the next biggest complaint I get is speed, right? Speed on East, speed on West, speed on Hacienda, speed over on Harbor. I know traditionally we have met that by hiring on overtime, which chews up our time twice as fast. Have we explored, and I think you mentioned this, have we explored the possibility of taking maybe 10 hours a week of that normal time and trying to working with the department to get someone here on normal time rather than on normal overtime as part of a traffic enforcement position that we...
something...
That's one, like I said, one of the biggest complaints I get involving our law enforcement coverage is speeding, specifically at night. So have we looked at any formula that would work with the sheriff's department to convert some of that 30 hours a week, and instead of only getting maybe 15 hours worth of work because we're paying someone double time, and I don't think it translates to half, it's actually a little more than half, but have we looked at that possibility?
We haven't looked at that possibility with them, but something we definitely could explore in converting some of that, because we used to hire the motor deputies. We had a lot of motor deputies in the past. Unfortunately, a lot of them have been injured or retired or promoted, and there's not as many of those motor deputies, which were excellent. They will say, if a motor deputy pulls you over, you are getting a ticket.
No, they would sit in my driveway and write tickets. I mean, as fast as they could, as fast as every time they come back, they'd be gone again writing another speeding ticket for speed on Hacienda. But I'm trying to find out a way, is there ways that we can approach the sheriff's department to, literally take that 30 hours that we have beyond the 40's already chewed up with Deputy Beltran. Taking that extra 30 hours that we have and converting it into at least part of it. If we're not using it on other things, continue on what I'll call the off-hour responses into the city.
Yeah.
Is there a way to take maybe 20 hours would be half a billet, half a position, and getting someone here to work traffic in the evening hours when we get the most complaints about speed contests, speeding on East and West in particular, and then.
Yeah, definitely something we can explore and sit down with contract services and our management team there at the station, see if it's something we could work towards.
Because while the motors are a great thing, right, and it doesn't have to be a motor. I mean, they're just, for our streets, they work a lot better and they're probably a lot more productive. But even just a traffic car in the city would be something we should look at doing a few hours a week, just to and if we could vary the hours, because I think it's common knowledge that in the evening, I can tell you that traffic behavior in the daytime, and I live right on Hacienda, is very different than traffic behavior after 8 p.m.
It definitely is. You see that out and about when we're here late as well and things.
Okay.
Okay. We can definitely explore that with them.
Any other comments from the council off of Rafferty, or should we open it up?
I had a couple of quick questions. A few years ago, we get practically none of the revenue from the ticket for the oversized vehicle. And we were talking a couple of years ago about changing our ordinance so that the deputy could cite for our ordinance, and that would increase, it's not a lot of money, but is that on the back burner? Or?
That had been Deputy Valencia when he was here. He had done a lot of work towards looking at not only the code sections, the vehicle code sections that they write the trucks on, but other ways of doing it as well. After he left, we haven't explored it that much, but something we could pick up, back up again, and go through.
The only issue, Carol, I think if I remember correctly, when I sat down with Deputy Valencia and went through this, one of the big hurdles we were trying to get over on creating our own ordinances, it's not a moving violation, so it doesn't attach to the person, and you don't go through the courts. It's more of a civil issue between us and actually the owner of the vehicle. And other than putting a lien, I think he determined that the only way to collect would be to actually put a lien on. And then you start getting to the point of diminishing returns. How much that costs versus how much the citations were. That was one of the big struggles we were having, is that when you cite someone for an actual moving violation, it's tied, that vehicle registration can't get renewed, and or
Points on the driver's license.
person, it goes right on their license and counts as points, and they get hauled in front of a court. Unless we want to establish a court in La Habra Heights, we wouldn't have that same leverage to get payment for those violations.
Oh, that's the first I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, that was one of the concerns that you brought. Rapper, I think he might have shared that with you too, right?
Yeah, it was one of the ways we were trying to figure out the best way to do it, or it kind of works into like an administrative citation. So like our parking tickets or like code enforcement, when we do code enforcement citations, it's like that. Yeah.
And then,
Still an option we should look at, though,
Oh.
especially for commercial enforcement. I mean, I think we should probably sit down with Todd and see if Todd's company has someone.
right, I mean, it's worth looking at.
Yep, I agree.
I just don't understand quite, okay, we pay, what is it, $700,000 or $800,000, and then is the overtime, what's the overtime rate? Is that an hourly rate that varies based on whether it's a community service vehicle?
Based off the type of service
So
we're providing.
is it just being called overtime because it's over our 70 hours, or is it double the normal rate?
They bill, depends on the type of use it's going to be. So like community services officer versus a deputy versus a commercial enforcement truck, they bill it at a different rate for that. And a lot of it is above and beyond, like, so Lopez, our CSO, he works 40 hours already, and then he does an additional 20 hours a week with us. So it's
So we're
overtime.
paying him at that additional 20 hours.
We're paying him
Yeah.
at sheriff's overtime, which is like 1.5 or,
It varies depending on the level. Sometimes it's like you said, it's closer to 2 for some of the more specialized
So
services.
we ask for, if someone comes into the city, like we have an event when Deputy Beltran isn't here, someone comes into the city, that's just normal minutes. You just get charged for, into that 70 hours, they charge you minutes, right, for a deputy. If we ask for a specific thing, like the motorcycle traffic enforcement officers to come in, they would come in at an overtime rate that would translate into, I mean, it would still translate into minutes of usage, but the minutes of usage would be significantly higher. It wouldn't be 1-to-1. It would be, what is it, 2 to 1, almost 3 to 1 minutes when we hire someone, when we ask for someone to come in. So it's a little different formula when we to the specific enforcement activities. That's why 70 minutes, 30 additional hours might seem like a lot, but it gets chewed up pretty quick when you do like specific enforcement activities because it's not a one-to-one rate.
When we got into this,
very
as far as the motorcycle police, bringing the motorcycle cops in here, we looked at all of that, and in order to have them in here on a non-overtime situation, we would have to cover the cost of the motorcycle. So when we bring them in, no, that's fact. And when we bring them in, those motorcycle police volunteer to work overtime in our city. So that's how we get around actually paying for the motorcycle itself. So that was part of the big cost benefit.
But we still have to pay.
We have to
Yeah.
pay the overtime
The
rate,
overtime rate.
and that policeman is actually on overtime when he's here, because he volunteers to work overtime in our city when we
So we can
call
get
him.
more money.
So he can get more money,
So,
yeah.
but if we reduce the 70 hours to 60 hours of the dedicated guy, can we get 10 hours at,
Well, that's what I've asked Rafferty, to look into,
Oh,
is
okay.
that it probably wouldn't, we'd probably have a tough time with 10, but 20, if we could find another contract city that works with the sheriff's department, like industry, that would be willing, because Hacienda doesn't, it gets complex, but Hacienda Heights doesn't use the sheriff's department for traffic enforcement, they use CHP.
Speech.
So it's a little complex, but industry does, and some of the other cities around us do. Pico Rivera, which is another city, has their own traffic, so they might be willing to split a traffic car with us, to where you get someone, you get a body at a specific rate to come into your city and not chew up
okay.
so much time. So something we should look at. We should also talk, I know industry is our station, but we might want to bring Pico Rivera in too, because they're pretty close, and they could have someone here in, 15 minutes from Pico Rivera and work 4 hours.
Yeah, especially if it's like traffic enforcement, they could
Right.
come and go relatively quickly and easily.
And I think they have motors at Pico too, so might
We've
be
been,
something to look at.
we've been trying to get one of the Pico motors to come over.
One more question. Does the totals you gave, Angie, does that include the liability insurance? Okay, that's all I want.
Yes,
Yes.
Thank you.
all right. So we've been chatting for almost an hour. Could we, I know, and I'm blaming myself.
That's
I
my
thought-
end of question.
Okay,
I'd like to hear from our residents.
I thought we were here to chat.
all right. Anyone from the crowd have a comment?
No, I do have a question.
Come up to the podium, because we're recording this for everyone so that they can hear you. Just say who you are, and that way there.
Hi, Monica Guns, Reposado Drive. In the past, many years ago, they had actually put some like bot spots on Hacienda to slow down traffic, the bumps.
the
Not,
dot- the
not,
bumps?
not actually the
Yeah.
speed humps or bumps, but the spots.
Yep.
And they were removed. Can we put something like that along Hacienda on the curve areas? Because I know when
Yeah.
I pull off of Reposado, there are no cars coming, and by the time I get out, look in my rearview mirror, a car will be on my bumper.
The reason they got removed was because residents that live on Hacienda had to hear them all night.
Oh,
They're loud.
okay.
They're very
And they're
loud.
really loud.
Would the speed humps or bumps be just as loud?
So Hacienda, we're fortunate again to have a lot of very talented people that live in our city. So we do have several traffic engineers that live in our city.
Uh-huh.
And trust me, as a resident that lives on Hacienda, and watching the speed and the amount of traffic that comes on Hacienda, we've engaged them numerous times about, one of the things we brought up was the speed humps on Hacienda. And unfortunately, because there's very few sections of Hacienda that are straight enough, so where we're concerned about speed is literally on areas that have the curves and on all the other, you can't put anything there that would cause a
Oh, may
safety
cause an
issue.
accident, yes.
And so there's, with the speed, again, unfortunately, we don't get to dictate the speed on Hacienda. It's like an average speed that traffic goes. And because of that, the speed limit is you have to have, in order to do radar, there's a lot, it's really complex, but in order to do radar enforcement, you have to do speed surveys. Speed surveys then dictate the speed that you can post that road at. And there's a certain speed at which you just cannot put those types of devices on the road, and unfortunately, Hacienda doesn't qualify.
Okay.
We've looked at it every which way we can. You know, we've looked at even, I mean, Rafferty has, and the staff have done, you know, great things trying to play with like traffic light timing to see if we can use that to slow
That
people
was my
down.
next suggestion, because I
And
can't get off
unfortunately,
Reposado.
we gridlock, I mean, we can easily gridlock Hacienda, which has an effect, but then there's residents that come in on Hacienda and complain to us that, hey, Hacienda's gridlocked, I can't get my kids to school, I can't get to work. So it's a balancing act that we have to kind of follow on making sure we kind of try to keep both sides happy while keeping people safe.
Okay, like with syncing the lights, I know trying to get off Reposado during the rush periods,
Yep.
it's hard to get a break. And even though it's painted, do not block the area in front of my street, people sit in that and they'll stare at me, you know, and I'll put my hand out the window even like, stop, you know, I need to get out. But, and I have one other question too. What about, do any of our lights, are they capable of monitoring cars with cameras for speeding?
No.
Is there
No,
such a thing?
There certainly are, and I think one of the good news things that I'm seeing happen is that camera enforcement is now becoming a more accepted mechanism for managing traffic. So there's a couple of cities that have just been I mean, it literally requires the governor to approve
Oh,
that change in the law. So, but the
Yeah.
good news is there's at least 2 cities now that have that approval, that are using speed enforcement cameras. You know, I'm following that very closely because I think there's a lot of use cases where that might work in our city. The thing we have to remember is they're non-discriminate.
right.
And I can
Yeah.
guarantee you, I see a lot of people speeding through this city that live in this city. So, you know, where I think our deputies are a little, I won't talk for the motorcycle cops, but I know our deputy is very remiss to give one of our residents a ticket. He'll give them a good talking to, but
Yeah.
there's that, you know, there's that discretion that I think cameras become very non-discriminate and, you know, so, but there is that. I mean, there is that. I mean, I know this is a public safety forum. I don't know if anyone's going to bring up the use of license plate readers in the city, but that's another safety mechanism
Yes.
that I personally believe in and would like to see that have been very useful for solving crimes. Beverly Hills uses them. I've seen their technology. I've actually got to see it demonstrated. It's amazing. You know, it's very Big Brother-ish. And yeah, La Habra's another city that's using them. And they're very non-discriminate. It's really hard to see, but if you look at most of them are on traffic signals, and they're lower down, usually above the first signal, above the sidewalk. If you look, there's a little black device that sits above, and it's usually pointing the opposite
Right.
direction of the signal. Those are license plate readers, and they're very good at solving crime. So another thing that we might want to consider in our city is
Yeah.
putting license plate readers on points of entry and points of exit into the city, because when something happens at night, people have to go in and out in cars, and that's
Yeah.
way out.
I have one more observation since the new light has been put in at Avocado Crest. People do not follow the no turn on red at that signal. When I'm on Hacienda or even when I'm on Avocado Crest, people will stop and zoom right out. So to me, that would be a good area to have a camera as well. So anyhow, thank you for your time.
You're very welcome, Monica. Thank you.
If I can make a brief comment, it seems to me the ultimate issue is it's question of safety to leave Reposado and go into Hacienda versus, I don't want to use the word inconvenience, but basically, essentially inconvenience and being slowed down on for other people. And quite frankly, I think we ought to, obviously we have concern for those who would be affected by by helping out the people in Reposado, but the end of the day, to me, public safety is more important than whether it takes you an extra 5 or 10 minutes to get someplace. So we ought to take a good look and see if perhaps we can accommodate both concerns as much as possible, but at the end of the day, public safety is more important.
Thanks, Norm. And Monica, I share your grief with getting out on Reposado. I too have to turn sometimes left onto Hacienda, and I do the same thing. Yeah.
I have to come out on East Road because I can't get out. So, yeah, it's very interesting.
Hey, good morning, guys. My name's Eddie. I live on Cypress. I meant to bring this up at the last meeting. Do we have a reverse 911 system in place, like with all the residents' phone numbers in zones, so that we could tip them off if something was going, like a fire was coming or something like that?
We do. We have a Nixle system,
Okay.
which taps into that one that we can do a few ways, geolocation wise. So it'll hit even if you're signed up or not. There's a way to do it.
Okay.
All enough up.
And Eddie, I would follow up.
With cell phones or just the landlines?
It works our system works a couple of ways. It'll send an email as well, so you can sign up for email notification. And I don't know about the landlines. I'd have to look back at landlines, but it definitely text message, phone call, email. It will do your cell phone. If you see Mr. Dominguez in the back of the room there, he'll show you the QR code, get you signed up.
Okay,
I
cool.
don't see John. Is John here? Might have stepped out. But I was just going to say, Eddie, John Dominguez, he's very active. Are you a member of the La Habra Heights Facebook page?
I don't know. I'm not on Facebook, but I'm sure my wife is.
Okay, yeah, I would become a member, or sorry, I shouldn't say that. If your wife is a member, get with John and maybe attend one of the EPC meetings, the Emergency Preparedness Committee meetings. John is really active in those issues, the reverse 911, the Nixle issues. Also, there's several apps that John has been working with. Go ahead, Raph.
This is one of the maps. So Mr. Dominguez has been working on developing a series of maps and things like that that'll go out and get posted. But on this one that he has here, it's been floating around City Hall. There is a bunch of QR codes on the top, so it'll give a few different things. So like Watch Duty, Pulse Point, some of the other Genesis, some of the other like emergency activated ones. Also has a QR code for the Alert LHH. So you can snap a picture of this one. And also later on, we're having another event after this one at the park. That's probably where Mr. Dominguez is right now, getting ready for that. But he can help you with any of those things. And then we got this one right here, so you can scan and get you going.
Could you put your name and phone number on that paper, and we can give it to John, and he'll call you?
Sure.
And your email?
Yeah.
And then I'll just make another pitch for Watch Duty. If you don't, if there's one app that you have in your phone up here in the Heights, I just strongly recommend Watch Duty. I loaded it last year during the fires in LA, and the amount of information you get and the speed at which you get that information, it's really incredible. So the minute that the fire department determines that they need that they want to evacuate, this app picks it up and it gives you like a very specific alert on your phone that overrides any silencing you have and anything else if you have it configured correctly. My wife has it. It's the reason she keeps her phone on at night sometimes when it's windy, because she wants to make sure she gets those alerts.
Okay, cool. The extra 30 hours a week, do those roll over, or is it a use it or lose it?
They pretty much, they don't roll over, they use them. So say we're short, they will provide additional staffing in. So if they watch them in the minutes as we go through the month. And if we are under, they will try to backfill with deputies to come in and fill.
It's not, I'll just say this, it's not, that's why I was asking the question, because again, having worked for a long time with the sheriff's, it's not the most useful, it's not the most beneficial use of our hours, because literally it's just someone coming into the city and driving around, just chewing up minutes, that's all it is.
Unless we had a motorcycle that they could do the traffic enforcement
So
on?
that's that's where we have to be really specific about what we want them to do. If we're not, if they're just coming in and chewing up minutes, they're not. I've been used that way, right? We're short minutes in this city, John. Go drive around and I mean, literally you have a computer that's geo-referenced. So you just log into that city and you literally, you're doing law enforcement activities in the city, but it's not as prescriptive as what we would want to see those minutes being used in our city. So that's why I'm trying to figure out how long and short we are each month, because that will, if we're more prescriptive, like let's see if we can find a motorcycle and bring it in for those extra, 20 hours a week. We should try to do that.
Okay. You said that the fee you guys tried to add to the big rigs because it wasn't a moving violation. What if you went after the speeding tickets and added a fee to speeding tickets, because that is a moving violation?
It's how you write the citation. So if the citation is written as a moving violation under a vehicle code, a California vehicle code, you're allowed to attach those onto the driver's license of the person. And so they become very incentivized to do that. You can also arrest someone for not showing up to court or not paying the ticket. Municipal code, non-vehicle code or penal code violations don't carry that same ability. They're more of a civil issue. So you have to we as the city then have to enforce them. We don't have the ability to enforce like a penal code or a vehicle code violation.
So it doesn't matter if it's a moving violation or a semi-truck violation, it's still the same riddle to go through?
That's right.
Okay. And then the last one was the license plate cameras would be a good move, in my opinion. I mean, they're already up on the highways. Wouldn't be that detrimental to our roadways here to put them up. And everyone, like you're saying, everyone who comes in here has to come back out. So the sheriff's department has access to everyone's information coming and going.
So that's, again, we would, it's something from a public safety perspective, we should probably, they're not expensive. It's something we should probably agendize and make sure that the rest of our residents feel the same way you do.
Right. And then, one more thing, offering areas for training to the sheriff's department, like, for example, at my yard in Fullerton, we let the dog team come in and do search and rescue training in our debris piles. I don't know, maybe at the park, letting them do training, just, having 20, 30 cop cars in one place at one time, just a show of force or presence. But I don't know if you guys do that. But yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great, really good comments. Others? Steve, I hope you'll go a little bit into some additional details on what you found out about how other cities use non-sworn security. I have Catherine, I think Catherine's here. Catherine knows I've been after the Habitat. The Habitat uses sworn officers exclusively to patrol at I think they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on sworn officers, and have said, is your solution appropriate for them? Instead of having a sworn ranger out patrolling, can they use non-sworn security to do the same thing at a much reduced cost? So I'm really interested to hear what you found out.
Yeah, I had actually sent the Habitat Authority about that over a couple of years, sent them, like I sent to you guys, the contracts, and they'd be saving money, but I guess it didn't pique their interest. A few days ago, I looked at the crime map, and La Habra Heights is an island of peace surrounded by crime. And crime is usually a function of population and density, and something we don't, unfortunately, have control over unless we elect new people, is the state is trying to force crime into safe communities through housing policies. It's interesting to see that the sheriff's spending, it's almost level over the last 5 years, which is a lot better than I thought. And then as far as crossing county lines, even though I think we probably get the best deal from the sheriff's department, La Habra uses LA County Fire, so there was some dispensation to be able to do that. So if for some strange reason La Habra Police was cheaper, it should be doable. And then speed humps, which we talked about 25 years ago.
We did.
Those could be put on East Road, and they have bolt-on speed humps, so you could just get a couple and try them and see how they work without spending the money of actually laying down the asphalt.
Is there a spot on East Road, Stephen, that you'd like us to look at where, I know I've got some complaints usually down toward the far end of East Road, but is there a specific?
Yeah, I'd say
location?
between Valet and Fullerton Road is a
Yeah, that's
straight stretch, so
where I get the most number of people sending me notes about.
you'd probably need a few of them, but at least try one or two bolt-on ones and see how they work.
Is the speed 25 there? Because I know that's kind of the limit. Usually it's 25 is the upper end limit for bolting those on, according to the people that are traffic engineers I've talked to. But we should ask the road.
We can look on exploring some more again.
Yeah, they got a ton of them in La Habra. They think they have one Cypress Street. I would think that's a 30-mile-an-hour zone, but maybe they lowered it to 25 to do that. You listen to the discussion about how the sheriff's spending goes. It seems like we should try to reduce or eliminate overtime because we're paying 2 or 3 times as much for the same minute of service. And the way to do that is using the private contract services. You could even use the private contract services for patrol and then regular sheriff hours for other special stuff.
The one question I had, Stephen, when I was reading your note, I didn't fully comprehend how liability for that. So let's say one of those contract people do something to someone.
Well, the contracts had liability
I was just wondering if that's been tested.
requirement.
I was just wondering if you found where that's been tested, where does the contract survive California courts? In other words, is there a shift of liability to the city for having contracted with an entity or the city
Oh, yeah, no,
bears?
that I don't know.
That's my concern in
I had
California.
sent a couple of messages to Covered 6, and they said they were going to get back to me, but they haven't yet, so I might know by Monday.
That's my big concern, because usually it's a test that I'm seeing more frequently, and I know we have 2 attorneys on the council here that might want to opine, but I get concerned when we have someone doing something as sensitive as law enforcement activities, which is what they'd be doing, and you don't have the backing of someone like LA County and JPIA and the other mechanisms behind that.
Yeah, the contracts did have requirement for liability insurance.
Yeah.
And anybody can sue anybody for anything. So I don't know how they wrote the liability requirements if they would just cover that.
Maybe, Raph, maybe one of the things we could do, because I think it's we should explore it.
I have it in a note for Todd and I to talk specifically about the liability side of it.
And maybe even reach out to JPIA and see with our people at JPIA if other cities are doing this, using private firms to, and Steve had a couple of good examples. I think you were copying those.
Yeah.
Then Avocado Crest, the no turn on red. People take the right because they feel they can do it safely because you have enough field of view from the traffic coming out from the south.
Yep.
So that's a consideration. And then we do need to stay within our budget with creative solutions like you're discussing now.
So just one second, Rafferty, the no turn on red on, I was going to ask this, what Monica that brought it up. Because there was, that wasn't a concern when it was a stop sign, right? Was it just something we felt we needed to do, or what was the justification for putting that up?
So the no turn on right was from the traffic engineer that prepared the plans, looking through the crash and accident data, felt that there was a need to have a no turn on red at the intersection. So even before we were getting ready to turn the signal live and putting up some of those last signs that did go up were the no turn on red, we reconfirmed with that engineer to make sure that that was truly what we needed to do at that particular time, and that's what they felt. It's something that we're going to watch and look. Some of it too is the order of the signs that are there. It's a little bit harder. There's a no overweight truck sign that sort of blocks the no turn on red sign as you're going down Avocado Crest towards the intersection. So we're going to reorder those signs into a different configuration, and we'll watch and monitor, and that may go away in the future as we work that signal.
We don't, do we feel that we need, I mean, we haven't had any accidents there, right, since the signal's gone in?
Since the signal's gone live, no.
Just something to watch, I guess.
It is a little bit tighter when you make that right today than it was before due to the configuration, new configuration of the lanes.
Okay.
Yeah, and most of the day, there's not enough traffic to need to stop for right on red. I mean, you need to stop, but not have no turn on red. I was at Leisure World a few weeks ago looking at something someone was selling, and they have lit no turn on red. So let's say you wanted to have no turn on red from 3 to 5, you could just have a lit sign there on Hacienda, and when it's okay to take a right on red, it would be off. Yeah, we used to have the volunteers in patrol. I don't know if it's so hard to get volunteers now. They'll never work again, in which case having the private security could fill the same for less of a cost than the sheriff. License plate readers, La Habra Heights was either the first in the state or the first in the county to have license plate readers back in 2007 at the light at West Road and up at Skyline. The reason that I heard that they're no longer in service was squirrels. The squirrels ate the wires.
And that the other thing is the technology stopped, the company that was running those stopped supporting.
Yeah, that's what I understood. It was expensive. You had to rebuy a new computer program.
Yeah.
But
the new, Stephen, there's no reason
Yeah.
now. That's not a viable
Yeah.
excuse. The new cameras are really inexpensive. I've got, anyone coming onto our private road, we've got license plate readers now that track those, and they're a few $100s, and the software is built into the camera now. You just need an internet connection, and the camera contains all the software, and you just log into the camera, and it shows you every license plate. So,
Yeah, my point is that they have been used in the city before, and they're not expensive. And it's actually, back in 2007, I went on a ride with a sheriff car where they went down to the Albertsons parking lot, and you saw, just as they're driving down both sides of the aisle, it would tell you all the information on the cars as it passed at speed. So they are useful.
so are you supportive of us moving in a direction of putting those cameras in the city?
Yeah, they're good for solving burglaries and things. At one point, someone brought up about having them at each street that comes into the city, which aren't that many, I think 12. So no one could get in or out without there being a record of them doing so. I think some people who live in the city don't like the idea, so it is worth a discussion. And then overweight trucks, that is something back in 2007 I asked the Sheriff's Department about, and the license plate company, I think they were here too, is can those cameras be used to do overweight violations? And they said yes, because let's say a truck comes in at West Road at such and such a time, and it registers again at Skyline so much time later, there's no possible way that they did a delivery in the city, so they would automatically get a ticket. So that should be something doable. Then something that used to be done, it's kind of sporadic now, is the monthly sheriff reports would list the street where whatever happened occurred, so you kind of get an idea of where crime was in the city, but they haven't been doing that consistently, so that would be something to bring back.
There might be some victims' rights.
Yeah, but I'm just saying like burglary and stuff. I think of those like elder abuse or something like that, they wouldn't put the street. But your run-of-the-mill crimes would always go on there.
Yeah, it
My,
really seems
my
like,
recollection there was their system, as you can tell by the report, it's not the most eloquent report, and I think their system had some limitations.
yeah,
And in order to meet the requirement, they just eliminated it. It's a good question. We can ask if they could bring it back in for the crimes that allow that type of reporting.
it's, you know, it seems like those are data points that are being missed. If we're not being told where we're having repeated auto burglaries, for example, it's probably clustered. I mean, those things are normally clustered. And it's, I always thought, when I got on the council, I thought, this is silly. Why aren't we telling us where this happens? I mean, it's even a traffic collision. It would be nice to know where the TC occurred, to me.
I think Rafferty has the ability to ask for it. I don't know that it can be published publicly.
We can typically ask for reports for those. We do get the accident crash reports that when they hit a guardrail or some city property, we will get those traffic reports so we can go through the insurance claim process.
Something I've mentioned for many years, I'll say again. When I first mentioned it, it was kind of like the cutting edge of technology, but now it's old hat. But it still should be used, is the sheriff cars have GPS. You should be able to replay the route that a sheriff vehicle did on a certain day. That would be useful for the council members and city staff. If you know where they went, you say, why did they spend 2 hours sitting here? Then you might find out there was a reason for them to be there. You might find out, gee, we need to redeploy and do patrol rather than sitting in this particular area. So that's simple. Yeah, and then when there are crimes, like serious crimes, that should go on the city website or sent out on Guac Talk or some other means the city has, because if someone on the next street over was robbed or mugged, the neighbors, I would think, would want to know as soon as possible, rather than find out if they read in the paper, if they even get it, or see online a few days later. And the last, Monica mentioned something, I think. Oh, no, but I think it was the other guy. It was Chris. Did I get that name, Chris?
Eddie.
Yeah, and mentioned about Facebook. Not everyone has Facebook. Everything should be posted first to the city website and then on alternative sites. So you should be able to find out any of that information on the city website and not have to depend on whether or not you're a member of Facebook or Nextdoor or Nixle or any of those things. And then a couple of things I found out Malibu just started doing was they have Starlink modules in the parking vehicles, and you could also use them in other vehicles, maybe code enforcement, because I know I don't get cell phone reception in the whole city, and others probably don't either. So if they have the Starlink module, they always have access to the internet. And Malibu also has cameras in some of their parks that are connected to the sheriff live monitoring. So rather than having the lights burning overnight at the park, which is a violation of the city's dark sky policies, you could have cameras up there that can be motion detected and alert the sheriff, maybe look at this. Maybe it's just a coyote, maybe it's a person. And the last thing is the sheriff is code enforcement when the city is closed, which is most of the week. So do they have the tools to do the job? Do they have access to permits if they driving through the street and they see a cement mixer or hear jackhammering or nail guns? Can they check that address to see if they have a permit and know whether it's a code violation or they just drive through blind, not knowing and not having access? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Any others? All right, Norm, you said you were reserving your comments until after public comment?
Yes, I want to speak a little bit more about the VOP program. When I joined the VOPs in 2001, 2002, we had 21 VOPs, and we patrolled we had average 2 patrols a day. And of course, this is in addition to the sworn deputies. Essentially what the VOP program, and of course what happened over a number of years, I'm trying to choose my words carefully, the VOPs felt lack of support, so basically it dwindled down to nothing at that point after about 5 or 6 years. But essentially what the VOPs are, it's a group of civilian volunteers that operate under the direction of the Sheriff Department, trained, supervised under the command and control of the Sheriff Department, and among other things do patrols in white cars as opposed to black and white cars, with identification being from the Sheriff Department. But again, we were civilian volunteers, no guns, no other weapons, no arrest powers, no traffic ticket authorization. Largely what we did is we patrolled, showed the colors, so to speak, and observed and report. We carried sheriff authorized radios so we could communicate directly to the sheriff's dispatch. Other things we did is we called from time to time to do traffic control, or if there was a closure or an accident, to assist then. Again, I emphasize the VOP's Volunteers Patrol are under the direction of the Sheriff Department, not under the direction of the city per se, and trained, insured, all the cost of patrols and so forth is paid for by the Sheriff Department, not by the city. The program is still operating in other cities. It was just in La Habra Heights for, trying not to be too critical, but essentially as a feeling of lack of support from the city. And this is something that I'd like to see reconstituted. I'll talk again at the next meeting of the Emergency Preparedness Committee. But this, in essence, could increase the visibility of the Sheriff Department in La Habra Heights. For example, when we parked on a street, say on Hacienda, just off the street, it's interesting how many people slow down when they see our cars, even though we couldn't give them a ticket if we wanted to. Other things we do at the request of a resident, we'd make additional checks and so forth. Sometimes residents are on vacations. We would request additional surveys by the volunteers on patrol. This is something that other cities in the industry station jurisdiction still exists there, and it's kind of a force multiplier basically of what the sheriff does. And again, I will bring this up again to the Emergency Preparedness Committee, who are so busy with so many other things, reconstituting the CERT program, working so hard on evacuation routes, organizing neighbors to work with neighbors concerning the possibility of disasters and so forth. But at one time we had a very viable Volunteers on Patrol program, and it made a difference. And I hope we can gradually over time reconstitute it. I won't go into any more details, but thank you very much.
Rafferty, anything else?
No, just thank everybody for coming out and having a lively discussion again. And we do have another event after this one.
So maybe a little bit about process. So I take notes during these meetings. Rafferty, I know Rafferty does also, as does staff. We will have one more meeting after this on staffing, how we staff the city. Then we will have what I'll call a capstone event where we go back and we talk about all of the meetings, a direction forward for the city, the things, and I think it's really important that you have a position on how we should move forward on some of the issues that we've discussed in these meetings, that you attend that kind of capstone event where we will discuss about how do we begin to solve for the problems that we heard here, and what mechanisms should we put in motion to solve funding issues that we identify as part of these meetings. Brian?
No, I think the one thing we should probably take a look at, I think everybody was sort of in agreement on it, because we were the first ones to put in that license plate reader many, many years ago, and it was, things have changed so much since then with the technology and the software and all that, and the software wasn't supporting that camera later on in the years. So I guess being the costs have come down tremendously on those cameras and things, that I think we should really take a look at that for all our entrance points.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several vendors out there of it. We should probably talk with the sheriff's department, because I know some of them are passive and some of them are active, where some just record them. Others both record and report. Given that we don't have, someone up here 24/7, maybe we should look into the more active type of cameras that can give feedback to industry when, if a car's coming up here that has once on it or has a suspect in it, that I would think that might be something they would dispatch someone up here to try to address.
I mean, what you described about somebody logging in and driving through the city, I think we can allocate funds toward maybe these cameras and actually get a lot more bang for our buck.
Should definitely look into what other contract cities are doing, so that we don't reinvent the wheel on this. I've got to believe other Los Angeles County Sheriff Department contract cities are using cameras, and my belief is usually the more aggressive ones are kind of in the 605 corridor, Lakewood, Bellflower. Those cities are pretty aggressive in the space, so I would maybe ask what they're doing.
We looked a couple of years ago at it when the technology was first coming out, and I think at that time, Sheriff's Department was looking at handling and storage of data. So I think they've worked out some of those issues today and are starting to utilize some of the technology that's out there. So definitely we can pick it back up.
So Brian, you want to do that before the January capstone, or is it February? I think it's February capstone meeting.
I can do that.
Okay. No, I mean, are we going to direct, so should we agendize it on a council meeting before we get to the February meeting, so that we get that in front of us sooner rather than waiting?
Well, I guess I'd like to get the feedback from the rest of the council members if they want this agendized or not.
I would
put it on the January meeting, you say?
I would say yes.
We can go through the process with the Sheriff's Department and look at what they utilize, preference, options, and then bring some of that information back to the council so you can have a better overview of what costs may be and things like
So
that.
January's okay?
We should be able to do it by January, yeah.
Okay.
Fine. We can agendize it. What I don't want to do is lose what we really learned today. And there's three real big takeaways here. We're talking about small things that we can do that'll help. But I think what we've learned today, based upon what's been presented, is we can probably more efficiently use the hours we have but that won't substantially change the costs. The 800,000 bucks we're spending out of the $2.5 million we get in real property tax is still a third of our budget, and we have no way to increase that. Every year, the sheriff's is going up at least 3%, probably higher. We can never go more than 1.3% a year in our real estate tax because we don't turn any houses over. And we're turning 30 and 40 houses a year over out of 2,200 houses. So none of that is coming up into the real value that would increase the tax base. So we're stuck at a minimum of a 1.5% loss every year as we move forward. And we don't have a stable platform for increasing that in any fashion as we exist today. We can't look to any other city. There really is not another alternative. Even small cities, as Rafferty, his study showed us, you're talking about in the millions of dollars to have a mini police force, and still you're going to contract back with sheriffs. So there's just we don't have an obvious or an even non-obvious option. So we have to find a way to permanently fund the sheriffs and to be able to keep up with the inflationary costs they have, including, and we, as staff brought up, 12 to 14% a year on the liability side of their charge. And the more you have lawsuits against the sheriff's department, the worse that piece gets. I think we're doing awfully well, but it's still way too much, and we don't have revenue to offset it. So that's the big takeaway today. I think we'll do everything we can to improve our efficiency, and the license plate readers are a great start, I think. And maybe we'll find some other ways to do it, but at the end of the day, the message here is clear, folks. We don't have enough revenue, and we're not going to have enough revenue. We have to find another way to get revenue.
Any closing comments?
I just echo Mr. Steffler, and it's not just the sheriff problem, it's the roads
No.
and the fire department.
Yeah,
It's
no.
cumulative.
And I think that's why the capstone meeting will be critical for us to sit down and prioritize, prioritize that. It's always, like I say at my day job, if you want me to do more here, there has to be sacrifices somewhere else, because in the end, we have to make the budget balance. So, again, we've gotten a lot of input from folks. I hope we continue to get input from people. I'm actively soliciting input. I know not everyone can get here on a Saturday, so actively solicit input from residents that I know that can't get here. If you all know people that are interested in this, I look at the email I get. I catalog, I file them so that I can bring them up in the last meeting to make sure that we're looking holistically at what people have to say. So, again, next month, we skip a month, right? December, we don't have a meeting. We pick back up in January. January will be on city staff and how we staff the city and manage the city through staffing. I know there's a lot of perspective there on what we should be doing more of and maybe not so much of, so it'd be good to hear about that. And then in February, we'll have the final meeting where we pull together some positions that we can then bring to council and more formally address in the council meetings. Last thing I'll add, we do have a dedication of the fire engine at the park today at 1 o'clock. I ask that, if you're watching this at home today live, that you try to make your way down there. We will be thanking Senator Archuleta for his generous grant for the engine itself. If you have younger kids, I know the fire department has some demonstrations and fun activities for the young and old alike. I know the city has some fire department merchandise that will be available at the event. So it should be a interesting couple hours, a fun-filled couple of hours, and I know that Senator Archuleta will be in attendance, and I think very grateful for the accolades that he'll get. So,
Thank you all.